And welcome back to the I Can't Believe This Is a Podcast. Today it's just the three of us, not the Bill Withers song. I am me. That's weirdly existential. Jules. Joining me are Dev and Chim.
Just the three of us.
Honestly,
guys,
I'm not really sure
out here?
if I'm me. I don't really know.
Oh, I just wanna let you all know, so you two and then anyone who's listening, we're actually recording on the day that we said we would record. Like 2 weeks after the previous episode. We're actually doing it.
I gotta leave, guys. That's... Wait, hold on.
Oh, I don't feel so good. I'm being responsible.
I don't know. It feels kind of unnatural, but maybe even healthy.
Oh my god, I'm being held to my word.
My body's turning inside out.
We only started recording a half an hour late.
Yeah, that doesn't matter so much when we actually landed on the day that we said we were going to record.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll let it slide. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess we can jump straight into it if we're gonna be all timely and all.
Oh yeah.
Overwatch 2 came out recently, and I personally haven't played it. I really want to though because I hear it's kind of ass.
Mm-hmm. I love how that's a reason for you to play it instead of a reason for you to not play it.
Matter of fact, let's tangent straight into a subtopic and then come back to Overwatch. I did the same thing with the Order 1886. I don't know if you guys followed the previous console generation launch, PS4, Xbox One, but the Order 1886 it came out about a year and a half after.
It's like
console
5
did.
hours long.
I mean, honestly, that part is not the problem. The problem is that it's boring as hell. It's like Gears of War minus the gratuitous violence and minus the active reload and the unique weapons. And so you have this really fascinating universe with these, pretty interesting characters. At the very least, whether or not they're interesting, they are well acted. And again, the world is like super cool, but the gameplay is just dull as a bag of rocks. And it is that for 5 hours. It's not like the best thing you've ever played for 5 hours. So I wonder if it's something similar with Overwatch where, in a way similar, where like people are really, really, they're still latched onto these characters, which are really well designed from the first game. But now in Overwatch 2, when you pair it with like Activision Blizzard's, we can talk about that later, the way that they make diverse characters, we'll put it that way, which isn't like a borderline automated process. There's like nothing there in terms of gameplay. And because the gameplay is either the same as Overwatch 1 or worse, or straight up missing features that they said would be in Overwatch 2, like the PvE part, people are starting to maybe become a little disillusioned, maybe. I would hope for that. It's an Activision Blizzard property. I think the more people are able to pull away from their nostalgia for previous Activision Blizzard IPs and actually see what Activision Blizzard is doing with these IPs right now, then that's healthier for all of those IPs and the developers who are putting their blood, sweat, and tears and piss and whatever into these games.
Despite it being a free-to-play game, and that's a really smart decision going forward with this, despite, multiple setbacks, people were worried that it was going to take over Overwatch 1. I still don't know. I don't follow it. I've never even played the first one. It shows how much I know about it, right? But I do know that the most obvious issue that goes tangential when there's the most amount of player base, usually the first day, is servers are down. There's also a specific issue that everybody's having a problem with is, nobody can play the game.
Oh, I love you've seen the pictures where it's like queue 30,000 players.
I don't watch it. Genuinely, from like a technical standpoint, don't understand how they aren't able to scale for the first day. How is your server design that bad? There are services out there that will literally let you scale infinitely.
And it's not just that, Dev, but it's like these guys are Activision fucking Blizzard.
Yeah.
So what exactly that question, but like said really exasperated.
Because like all you need to do is pay a few people who you're already paying to manage, your systems administration stuff, and just have them spin up as many extra servers as you need and just fork out the money for a good launch experience. Then everyone will be happy instead of hearing about it in every goddamn, news channel that follows video games about how, oh, nobody can play the game, the servers are all down, queue times are 7 hours.
We live in a...
It's that, but it's also missing the fact that you can't even play certain characters. That based on the amount of players that heroes that you can't play in the game, Blizzard has actually removed those characters because you can't even play as them. There's missing skins, missing cosmetics. I know that for a fact. You can't. There's this really. I like I said before, I don't follow it, but some of the funniest clips I've seen on Twitch, just the most common thing is, it's like, okay, finally, I've been in queue for 4 hours. I wanted to play World of Warcraft. I wanted to play literally anything else that just came out, but I'm finally playing Overwatch 2. Let's get it. And then it just freezes, and then it puts you back on that server waiting list, and then it doubles or triples like to 7 hours. And then it goes, and then you just see a man smack his keyboard in half.
It's so bad.
Yeah.
How?
It's not.
I really
want to
shout out. I want to shout out. Not that they need a shout out. They're infinitely bigger than our channel. But the YouTuber Zanny. I think out of all the Overwatch 2 videos by well-known YouTubers, his is definitely the funniest. There's the intro bit is brilliant, but he does the same thing where it's like him and obviously Donkey, where it's the whole thing about their video is the funny thing is the queue, and it's just getting kicked back to the queue, watching that number go down and then just pop back up to like 30,000 players. God, what a mess.
Man, I can say this. Well, here's something I actually really want to know. Out of all of us, Dev, have you played Overwatch 1 like extensively or at all?
Yes.
Oh, you have,
but not very much, because I actually bought the game when it first came out, like after a week after it came out, and I played it for a little bit at the beginning. I never got super into it, but I have actually, for once in my life, played a game that people are talking about.
Solid.
Well,
and you,
we're talking about
Jules?
For Overwatch
1. Yeah.
I was big in it. I played the beta.
Nice.
I pre-ordered it. I played it straight. That was like my multiplayer game for about a year.
Hell yeah.
So I liked Overwatch 1. The only things I got annoyed at were like typical things to get annoyed at in a hero shooter, where it's like, oh, I really hate this character and their ability, for no other reason than that it's just annoying. But like, it's annoying because the player who's playing that character is playing that character really well. Like Area of Denial, Mei specifically, freezing players, that just pissed me off. But in a good way, where it's like I want to figure out how to like be tactical in this match. And figure out a way to like, maybe pick this certain character that can combat this certain character, and then utilize this part of the map to like take them out.
What can you do to be that person's like arch rival? What can you do to counteract this? And then when you do that, and then you get in that line of thinking, which is good, that's actually how you start getting more into competitive games. Like that. I mean, I can say that extensively with fighting games. That's literally how that is. What character can I play to finally stop being pissed that I'm playing this game? And then you open yourself up to all these other holes. And then once you get to a point where like, it's not like you're mastering every character. That's not the point. It's never the point. I actually don't know anybody that's super good at, say, Tekken or Street Fighter or Smash Bros. That plays every single character. Realistically, you have your 3 or 4, but and it's funny in Blizzard's case, you don't have them because there's a chance the character that you want to play as was pulled by Blizzard. But you have
I don't actually know the story behind like characters being pulled. Well, what happened there?
Oh, so it's and I'm getting my information right here from Windows Central so I can source them. This specific bit is talking about how players of the original Overwatch may log into Overwatch 2 only to find that most of the first game's cast is unavailable to play. The developers have confirmed that this is an issue caused by Overwatch 2's first-time user experience being incorrectly applied to veteran players. Closing and relogging into the game is an effective workaround, but nothing's guaranteed.
There was that statistic where it's like if you were a newcoming player and you didn't have those characters unlocked to begin with or whatever, it would take you like something like 24 hours
Jeez.
of grinding just to unlock the original cast.
That's absurd.
Dude.
I wanted to say this one thing. This is the one thing I really want to jump in to. Dev, you haven't played any of the skateboarding games like Skate 1, Skate 2,
No, I
Skate 3,
haven't.
none of that. But I know, Jules, you have, right?
Skate 3.
Skate 3. Hell yeah.
And more recently, Session and
Nice.
Ollie World, which
Nice,
is
nice.
arcade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Despite you not knowing this, Dev, this is still like, I'd say this is still interesting, at least from like interaction between developer, publisher, and user experience with something that is very new with known bugs, but everybody's kind of working together to make it a better thing. Skate 4, which is just known as Skate, is in its pre-alpha build right now, where every character looks like they're like some corporate like flat color pastel, like everything is like not
Globo Homo,
great.
or whatever it's called.
Yeah. I mean, like if you're a Blender user, it's like your viewport display. It's the most basic of like not taxing anything on your computer. So I've seen people
Homo style.
I've seen people play the beta through like, some trickery on their like Steam Deck. So it's it's scalable. You can play it on anything. But what I think is really interesting comparatively between what Blizzard did, which is like launch this fucking huge thing, Overwatch 2, everybody's been waiting, and then server outage, bugs upon bugs upon bugs.
Yep.
The thing is that EA, surprisingly, right, Jules? EA, of all people, is wearing their bugs on their sleeve and is being like, you know what? We know that what you're looking at literally isn't Skate 1, 2, 3 or any of that, like what you're expecting. That's because we're going to get to that point. So all these things, we want everybody to play it. We know this is going to be, comparatively, Overwatch 2, Skate 4, they're both free to play games, but the way that EA is approaching it, where it's this massive community thing, where it's like, there's Skate 2 elitists, there's Skate 3 elitists. I'm a Skate 3 elitist. I'm sorry, people, don't kill me. But I have both. I like both. And everybody wants a bit of something. No Skate 2 fan wants to get in the game and feel like they got ripped off when the final version of that new free-to-play Skate game comes out. Finally for PC, finally for other systems beyond their locked consoles, and not get what they want. Same vice versa goes to the other players. So everybody's pitching in and trying to build this big thing that is like Skate 4, whereas with in Blizzard's case, they could take that approach, but they're not. It's just not. It's like a non-stop cringe compilation. It's really bad.
I mean, that you bring up EA is kind of twofold. It's on one hand, out of all the companies, who would have thought that we would have any goodwill in Electronic Arts? And then within Electronic Arts, this is like a thought experiment. If you got me, I don't know, like 7 years ago, and you said, all right, Jules, I want you to tell me, 7 years from now or whatever, I want you to tell me which EA intellectual properties will be like EA's worst flops that land them all the way up in an international court of law, get them banned in like Belgium, and then which of their IP become their holy grail godsend, return to faith PR success stories. I would have never guessed that the latter would have been Skate and Dead Space.
And surprisingly, FIFA 2.
Would have never... because it's their last one, so they had to...
It's their last one that before they finally get into the free-to-play market, which is why they're testing it out so strongly with their other games, and Skate primarily being their biggest community project that they've done. But FIFA, from what I understand,
psychological experiment that they've done.
Yeah, this is one of those.
I think it's really important to give like these big companies, like, don't get me wrong, I hate EA too. Like, I know everybody hates EA, but there's reasons that people hate EA. It's not people don't hate EA because they exist. We hate them. No, they hate them because of all the bad things that they've done. So it's actually good to give them credit when they do something right, so that they know, people react positively to this. We should do the right thing more often.
Somewhere deep in my mind, I wish that when the Dead Space remake comes out this upcoming January, Visceral Games is just resuscitated from the dead, which won't happen, but like I want that so bad, because they dropped more gameplay today. Actually, They had like a 30-minute live stream. Looks incredible. And I think the great thing about it, and this seems like it's true for Skate as well, is I call these games holy grail of like, PR, please have faith of us, faith in us sort of maneuvers, is because it's just exactly what the community would have wanted out of a sequel for those IPs.
Because
Skate
they
4,
contribute to it. They literally, what they want is what they get.
Did.
Yeah.
Skate 4 is that Dead Space isn't, and it's being made by the team who did Star Wars Squadrons, which is a multiplayer sort of dogfighting game. So, I mean, like, you can make the connection like, oh, well, both games are set in space, but they're totally different projects, and motive is still kind of unproven. But from what they've shown, it's like, oh, they get it. They get it. They know what Dead Space is about. They know why fans love Dead Space. They understand why people love Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2. They see why people might love Dead Space 3, and they take the best parts of all of them. Well, at least 1 and 2. And they've just made this thing that looks like it's just Dead Space. It's not like a bastardization of the IP, and likewise for Skate.
Nice.
And even back when it came out in 2019, after years of like either no Star Wars games or crap Star Wars games, Jedi Fallen Order came out, and it was just really, really good. And yeah, what you said, Dev, you need to show these companies are neither your friend nor your foe. They don't care. They'll exist with or without you. So the least you can do is vote with your wallet. If you do want something that they sell, and they're making it in a way that is, beneficial to creativity, like for games at least, beneficial to the sort of creative industry that it's in, and also to you and other people as consumers, then show that company that you like what they're doing. Like if Jedi Fallen Order is a full price game, but it is a fully functioning game at release, fully self-contained, no cliffhanger that's trying to peddle you DLC, none of that crap. It's just a full finished game that is thoroughly enjoyable and polished and fun to play. Show EA that you want that. If Skate 4 comes out and it is just, the bomb.com and it just works, and you want more Skate, then you buy Skate. You show EA, yes, you're going in the right direction this time.
Yeah, I think
any other publisher.
Like, people love to bitch and complain about things on social media, and sometimes that actually does work. But a lot of the time, the only thing they are going to care about is whether or not that's actually impacting their monetary bottom line. And usually it doesn't. The only time it does impact their monetary bottom line is when the cause of everyone bitching is that it's so bad that people are, refunding it or not buying it in the first place.
Well, if it's in the free-to-play market, which, we were just discussing,
that does matter.
Then it's like, how would you communicate that with the dev? I mean, the people that are going to get their skins are going to get their skins regardless, but I can't imagine like a huge chunk. No, I can imagine that. Like, look at Fortnite. Look at how many people get skins.
Well,
buy V-Bucks. But like, yeah, go ahead.
I can give you one example of how people dealt with it in a free-to-play type setting. There is a gacha game called Blue Archive that did a global release a while back, and they censored something that wasn't even not safe for work just because they didn't fully articulate why. They said that they had to. And people kind of lost their shit because they had made all these commitments to not change the game for the global release. And because it was a Japanese game, or actually no, it was a Korean game, I think. Yeah, it's Korean, not Japanese, but it was same concept. But for the global release, they basically put out these statements like, "Oh, we're not gonna change it. We're gonna keep the game the way it is. We know that there are a lot of people around the world that want to play this, and they don't want to play a different game, so we're not gonna change it." When it released, people found out they changed a thing, and even though it was only like one thing, a lot of people who would have spent money on the gacha stuff didn't. They didn't. And recently, they came out with a statement saying some regulatory agency basically said, if we want to release these next few updates or whatever, we're going to have to change this and this, and or change our age rating. So we're going to undo the previous censorship and change the age rating. Because we saw how much people hated it.
I think
So they're doing it.
Was.
I don't know what's the change for
Just based
the
off of what you just said, I think I know what the change was.
for what?
For the game.
Put two and two together, Dev.
The one that already happened, or
The change that made it so that people went from liking the thing to being like, no, we don't like the thing. I think I know what the change was. You just said the word censorship.
Oh, no.
You just
yeah.
mentioned where the game was from. You mentioned the issue was censorship.
Yeah,
you mentioned
issue
regulatory
censorship.
agencies in like presumably countries that
No,
aren't
actually, it was a Korea
thing. Or Japan. Oh, it was a Korean thing?
Yeah, it was a
Okay.
Korean, like some kind of Korean ratings thing. Basically said, okay, if you want to release this globally, you have to follow these other standards.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, in order to hit the global market, anyway.
I mean, I could tell you what the original one was.
It's not terribly exciting. What is it? I'm gonna see if I was right.
The original change that got people upset in the first place was there was a scene where one of the characters was shirtless, but her hair was covering her, and they zoomed in just on her face. They cut out the whole rest of the thing for the global release.
If I didn't have so much stuff on my desk, I would hit it and howl.
That's what the change was.
Yeah, I called it.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure that the future updates thing is going to be like, probably like, I think the reason that they realized that they had to deal with it instead of just continuing to do the same thing they did last time is because I think it's like an entire character model.
Did someone who was it? Was it Quantic Dream with Elliot Page's that
yes,
was a whole fiasco.
So that was dang it.
What was the guy's name? Is that David Cage?
It's David Cage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you talking about the models behind the shower scene? Or are you talking about Beyond Two Souls?
I think it was from Beyond Two Souls.
Yes, that was the whole thing. Look at us talking about topical Beyond Two Souls.
Anyway, long story short, they had a full nude character model for a scene that did not require that kind of detail.
Yeah. I heard that when the director of that game met with the Page, had brought a whole photo album from like when this person was a baby to like when they are now, and then just showed it to them. Just
Wait,
like,
what?
Yeah, and it was
like a fictional character though, right?
No.
Wait, what?
You wish.
No. So when Elliot Page went to scope out what was going on, meet with the director pulled out a whole book of stuff. Don't quote me on this, but that's just what I heard. And it's not super uncommon because this person prior to God, what was the most recent game? Detroit Become Human. This director has been quite the interesting fellow.
He had like nude pictures of all the people in the game, right? Right?
Well, yeah, except I can't even make.
No,
a joke
he was
about
just
that.
obsessed with Paige. He was just really obsessed.
It's a little bit of that, and also just the workplace that Quantic Dream kind of fosters.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's say that it was maybe adjacent to Ubisoft and Activision Blizzard.
That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
What a time.
What a time.
So what you guys are telling me is, long gone are the days of fuck you, give me money, and if you want a patch, you can eat my ass. You're telling me nowadays it's games are free, but everybody's a QA tester?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
You don't buy a game at launch. If anything, you get it like the day after if you really, really, really want to play it. But just stop buying games at launch, please.
Genuinely,
never, please.
Just give it like a week. Figure out
love of
if the
Christ.
game's good or not.
Yeah, if it's like a really, really small indie dev that you've been following on itch.io and they have their very first like global release on Steam, like if you really support them and you don't really care whether or not the game turns out to be incredible or whatever, then by all means pre-order that. But like in the AAA space, just stop pre-ordering.
If you're a cheap fuck like me, you can wait years and then it'll somehow be free on Epic Games if you're a shill like I am, and it'll just be free like Night in the Woods or Prey or literally any of those games, they will just show up free one day somehow. You're just gonna have to have the patience of a saint. Or you could go to your like local flea market, and this is actually pretty cool. I always talk about flea markets in this podcast. I feel like I'm gonna be the flea market king, the rat king. That's what I want to be known for. And you can pick up a copy. Shit, something I picked up recently was I picked up Octopath Traveler. Square Enix's own game came out. When was it? Like 2018, somewhere around that time.
Yeah, I remember hearing a lot about the game, but I don't actually know that much about it.
So, Square Enix obviously owns the rights and production to Final Fantasy, and their silly name. They have this they have this name for their company that does the Square Enix stuff called Studio.
It's like Nintendo, right? Where the studio name is like a code name or something.
It's so
like an acronym
like,
or something like that.
I don't get it.
Did they pull a Japan and name it like Studio one word that doesn't make any sense?
It's even weirder. It's called like Business Cloud 9 or something like that.
What?
Yeah,
that's way weirder. Yes,
it's so weird because
like
it was so simple.
Sure?
Back in the day, it was called SquareSoft. They made Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger. Like started pushing out projects like Xenogears, which would end up having its own studio. But like now it's called like sorry, I should have had this on me right quick, but yeah, it's just fucking weird.
No, dude. I just thought of the best name, and I'm hereby copywriting this, so nobody fucking steal it from me. Studio Synergy. Buzzword. Synergy.
Yeah.
There you go.
I got
Studio
one for you,
Synergy.
Dev. Studio Fax Machine.
Oh my god.
Office supplies.
In any event, what I was just going to mention about that is I got lost in the sauce. So Octopath Traveler, as I've been playing it, very similar to their old classics. It's called a HD 2D game, and we can go into this further about like how remakes kind of keep cropping up. But the gist of it is you have your old games, the SNESs, the NESs, and they're these massive. What you think of Final Fantasy. Even if you aren't a fan, you just know, like it's like you're playing a book. It's this big adventurous story, and the idea was it was always top down in perspective. Meaning that it was always flat planes, flat textures on flat things, and they went different. They ever since Final Fantasy VII, they went about it, from a 3D perspective, and they kept pushing that. And now it's like a fully 3D game with the newest release being Final Fantasy 16. It's going to come out, I believe, sometime next year. But in any event, this game kind of mixes both. It's sprites, that really beautiful pixel art. In a 3D setting with 3D engines and lighting, and you're moving in the Z-axis. And it's really brilliant. And they have a whole line of games Square Enix does where they call, they trademark the name HD 2D, where you have Live Alive, which is an old school 90s JRPG, which was also a top-down, like flat 2D game back on the SNES, which never came out outside of Japan, but it was still garnered like a cult classic. Not to the extent of Mother 3. I mean, don't get me wrong, that game is huge, but it was still big enough that when they revived it and it came out to the States through the Switch, it's a big deal. Then they have a Triangle Strategy, which is an isometric kind of take on that HD 2D thing. And I just thought it was interesting, something to bring up that, if I had to pinpoint a time frame, we've always had games get remastered. We've had a couple remakes here and there pop out, but nowhere until Capcom, this is my argument here. I only think it was until Capcom really pushed the pace with Resident Evil 2 remake that we're seeing games left and right get remakes. Games that we didn't even think would get remakes, like the newest Horizon Zero Dawn's getting one. Last of Us just came out.
Segue into.
Yeah, but I was just going to mention that, like, it's crazy that so many games are getting remakes, and my argument is, like, I think the starting point for this huge thing, this like movement, like what our generation is known for, is remaking old ass games into brand new 3D tech, is probably with Capcom.
And the reverse, which is making like the PS1 demix.
Yeah.
But
those come back.
remaking a game into something else. Bloodborne Kart is a particular favorite of mine.
I mean, you go for it, you first.
Yeah, just very briefly, because he brought up Horizon Zero Dawn's
It was your
potential
trigger
remake.
word.
Yeah. So the whole reason why that might be a thing, it's still in the rumor mill. I don't think it's actually been announced yet. But even still, it's worth mentioning because it's been brought up multiple times and people have, data mined the appropriate files and whatever. It's supposed to coincide with the TV show, which The Last of Us remake is also supposed to do for The Last of Us on HBO. But the difference is, I think I watched this YouTuber, Skill Up. He does video game commentary, analysis, reviews, that kind of thing. And he brings up a really good point in his in his review for The Last of Us Part 1, which is what they call it now. He compares it to getting like a deluxe box set of RoboCop, where it's like it's a premium version of something you like, you've played before. It's not necessarily new, but you really, 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 really like it. In the same way that someone might get Ryan Gosling's jacket from Drive. It's like, what the memes are, sure, but you really like the jacket. It's really cool. He's literally you, so you're gonna get it anyway. And I think that's a good point. The whole sort of mythologizing games thing, where these games or any entertainment really reaches this sort of legendary cult mythical status, like more recently Skyrim, which gets ported to something at least once every like 3 years, is it's a thing that already exists. It's a thing that happens. I think a lot of people were maybe a little bent out of shape that Sony did this with The Last of Us, just because the story is so pure and is so distilled and is so effortlessly timeless, that to remake it, especially at a price point that is higher than it has ever been. Remember, the game debuted at $60. The PS4 remaster was $50, and now this PS5 remake is $70. That's the egregious part, and I think everyone agrees on that. If you look around, you see people are like, "Yeah, cool project, price is too much."
Yeah.
The whole thing with the resurgence of not just older IPs, but like older entries in those IPs, like these 2D, 3D sort of remakes of Final Fantasy and such, purportedly at least. I feel like we've talked about this before. Just capitalizing on nostalgia, and like you said, Chim mentioned that it's like that's kind of our generation at least. Yeah, us three. There's a lot of remaking and remastering going on.
I don't really think it's just because of our generation though. It's because this is a phenomenon that's like.
It's happening
in all these different.
Our generation.
Okay, fair enough. It's happening with it. Like it's happening during this time in our generation, but
right, that's what I meant.
Like the thing that I've noticed is like it's not like video games invented this. I mean, we've been seeing it in movies for a long time, ramping up and ramping up and ramping up, and it's just they focus more and more on pumping out stuff from the same established IPs as opposed to coming up with new things because it's safer. They know that if they do a mediocre sequel to a movie, it's going to do well. And when that stops doing well, then what do? They fall back on the older stuff and they make a new version of the same thing they already did. Because, if somebody liked it the first time, well, surely they'll like it the second time. And if it's been enough, it's been long enough, well, they'll probably pay for it again. And I think when you look at a game where the original price was $60 and then they release a remake of it for $70, that just to me really shows the only reason they're doing this is because they think that people will pay for it because they remember liking this.
Yeah, and on that is the answer for like 90% of any entertainment property that gets put out again, that gets released again.
Yeah.
Within games specifically, it's been most successful with TV shows. The
Yeah,
Witcher,
absolutely.
Cyberpunk, Edge Runners most recently. Even though that wasn't a direct adaptation of the game, it in many ways it actually was really incredibly beneficial to the game that happened. Not just because of sales.
Yeah, it's not
figures
always a
and
bad
current player
thing.
count. Well, because Cyberpunk, while the story is great, the game world itself is ironically lacking a lot of character. And so now that people have this seed of a story in their head, in addition to the one that's already in the game, you can, like when people like role play in their games, like I am not the hero of this world. I am a gate repairman.
Yeah,
You get so
exactly.
invested in the universe, and it's because of offshoots and things like Cyberpunk.
Absolutely. Some of these things where you take an IP and you make more new stuff with it can be really good. To me, when you just start remaking the same thing, if it's old enough and it's really benefiting from this because you're really, revitalizing it, you're bringing something new to the game, then that can be amazing. But I feel like I'm starting to see more and more of just like, oh, this game that's like not even that old and looks totally fine. We're going to remake it because there's a new platform and we can make it look 5% better and sell it to you for $10 more. To me just feels like they're abusing it.
I like nothing more than adaptations.
Adaptations
of original concepts. Like you guys are just talking about Cyberpunk. Like Cyberpunk just recently got I need to get the name. I feel silly.
Edge Runners, I think.
Yes, Edge Runners. I just started watching on Netflix. I think animated by Studio Trigger. Same guys that did Kill la
speaking
Kill.
of Studio one word.
Yeah, Studio one word. Kill la Kill, Little Witch Academia, and
I'm pretty sure most of the people who worked on this were the same people that worked on
Devilman Crybaby. What is that show called?
No,
Crybaby. No. Crybaby was made by damn it, what is his name? He's amazing. I love him. Great director. But it's not a Trigger.
Okay.
Yeah. If anything, I think
Ichiro Okushi.
Yeah. Fucking amazing. Yeah. He's made some crazy amazing.
Yeah, he's done a lot over the years.
Masaki Yuasa, he's by far one of my favorite directors of all time, up there with the Ghibli's Miyazaki. It's because he's the guy that did the Keep Your Hands Off Isaacin and Tatami Galaxy and The Night of the Short Walk On Girl. He's brilliant and like one of those really few kind of geniuses that like when they put their hand on something, you just know it's them, all the way down to the art style because the guy's an artist. But in any event, the adaptation stuff is really amazing. One thing that I was watching recently that was getting adapted, I think it was pretty cool. Was that Cyberpunk thing?
Yeah, and it's that to me is a perfect example of how to do it right, which is you take a world, and you take all the existing information and you try and make something new with like it's a whole new group of people that didn't work on it's Studio Trigger. They had nothing to do with the production of Cyberpunk, obviously, but the actual like a lot of the work was their idea, and with input from like the previous stuff. And to me, that's like such a better creative process because having something external, if you can trust the people to do something good, then your end result will reflect that.
Massive spoiler warnings here for anybody that wants to play like the Drakengard series, like specifically Drakengard 1 and Nier, including Nier Replicant. But yeah, massive spoiler warnings here. But I don't think anybody does it quite as uniquely, quite as interestingly with their own work, adapting their own work into something completely new, quite as Yoko Taro, the director of those game series. He literally, the end of Drakengard 1, they have a joke ending. Or supposedly, that's what they say. So they wanted to do an homage to the series Ace Combat. So you take your massive medieval world where, and it's a really hard way to get this ending. You have a lot of stuff you have to do to get to that point where you get this, like, Yoko Taro is known for having endings A, B, C, D, E. Like in Nier Automata goes all the way to freaking Z.
Oh man.
With this one, they actually get sent to Tokyo in the real world, like with the dragons and the magic and all, like, the dragon, he has fire and whatever, and the main character, there's magic and all that different shit. And then the main boss battle is kind of this like ash. It's like this huge kind of pile of ashes that makes up like a human, and you have to fight it, and then everybody, including the dragon and the final boss, get exploded by some Ace Combat planes. And that was just meant to be a joke ending, but then Yoko Taro took that and was like, well, what if like the ashes and the magic and whatever got like spread throughout the city like one massive blizzard storm, and then what that would end up doing is creating the plot of Nier, which kind of jumps from like modern day Japan, but there are monsters there, there's magic, these entities that exist in another world but kind of somehow exist in our modern day. That explains that, and then why the future is more like fantasy because you're living in those conditions versus like something like a cyberpunk. So I honestly, Yoko Taro is a fucking baller.
Yes, I mean, some people can totally do it where they can, really add new things to their own work. But a lot of the time, like, if you can't do that, and most people can't, getting other influence can be really helpful for rounding stuff out, I feel like.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I guess the main thing is thinking about, like, whether or not changing stuff is a positive or a negative. Because for some things, it's a negative. For some things, people already like exactly what's there. And then you have to be respectful of that. Mm-hmm. But like with Cyberpunk, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of cool stuff there, but it just wasn't fleshed out.
Yeah.
There's a, I wouldn't even say it's a burgeoning market, but there is a fresh take on that. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Dev. It can be a little difficult to add on to your own work, especially after you've already finished it, shipped it off. So there's this like new, I wouldn't call it a new genre, but there's this trend. I hope it's a trend. I don't know what you would call it, but two games, Final Fantasy VII Remake and the Dead Space remake that's coming out this January. Mm-hmm. They're not, and without getting too spoilery, they're not really remakes.
Nope.
But they're being sold as remakes. And for a lot of reasons, again, without getting spoilery, I think that's really cool. And I like that. And like with anything creative, I think if we see too much of it, then it's no longer cool. But I think in small doses, it's exceptionally cool. What I'm talking about is taking that original game and significantly changing things.
Yeah.
Sometimes without even telling the people that you did that.
Interesting. Yeah, you gotta do it right. You still have to do it right. You can't just do random shit and expect people to like it because it's different. Just like you can't do the same thing 100 times and expect people to like it because it's the same thing they liked before.
Exactly.
But when you do it right, it can be so good.
Mm-hmm. There's so an example of that's not like a AAA game would be Black Mesa, which was developed by a team called the Crowbar Collective group of modders. They took the original Half-Life 1 and they pretty much remade the entire game as maybe you thought it looked like back when you played it. But a couple of exceptions. One, the level on rails, I think it's what it's called, is significantly more fun. And then two, the entire last chapter of the game, last couple of chapters called Zen, is just different. It's massive. It's expansive. Levels that used to be linear, the entirety of that last section, which used to be maybe 30 minutes tops, is now this multi-chapter, hour and a half long thing.
Yeah, that's actually an amazing example of how to do that kind of thing right.
And that one maybe didn't have the same surprise as Final Fantasy VII Remake's changes had, just because Crowbar Collective put the game in early access and they were updating people on what they were doing. And they weren't trying to hide it. They were making it a known quantity that, hey, we are completely renovating Zen. It will be like nothing you remember, in a good way. Dead Space also did that. And again, going back to the first topic we had, where it's like, I'm really surprised EA, of all companies, is being as transparent as they are with like two of the most beloved gaming properties out there. Well, at least in their library. Dead Space, the team, Motive, EA Motive, they had a bunch of live streams that ran from like last year to I think early this year. And they were just showing behind the scenes footage of like their gore system, you know, with the gibbing and like the dynamic limb and like muscle falling off, whatever. Their audio systems, their material shading systems, their lighting. They even brought on Gunnar Wright, who's the voice actor for Isaac Clarke. It's like just extreme transparency. But the crazy thing is, everything they've showed, it's not crazy. It's just cool. Again, it's cool. I like that they're doing this. Everything they've showed is very technical. The things that you would expect of a remake. Mm-hmm. I know Naughty Dog did a video for The Last of Us Part 1 remake where they showed like, here's what we're changing technically. But the difference between that and this Dead Space thing is there are fundamental gameplay changes. They've completely changed entire levels. They've changed level transitions. They've changed how Isaac, the player character, can interact with those levels, how he shoots. Isaac has a voice now. He has voice-acted lines, whereas in the original, he was a silent protagonist. And there's so many fundamental changes. And it is a different studio. It's not Visceral anymore. It's not Glenn Schofield. But I think it's a good example of what you mentioned, Dev, where it's a different team. But the cool thing is that it's a different team, but it's not a spin-off. It is the original.
Yeah.
And there's something fresh there that, again, don't overdo it, right? We can't dig into all of our nostalgic IPs and try to remake them.
Yeah, and I think historically there have been a lot of cases where, you know, switching over to a new team, it ends up being worse than the original or so on and so forth. But, like, that's not a given. The reason that usually happens is because you take an existing property and it's owned by some big corporation who isn't actually the one who's developing it. They don't keep on the old studio for whatever reason, bring in a new one, and are just like, here, take this, make this, do it exactly as we tell you to. Our marketing team will direct all of your actions, and then shovel it out to people. Like, you gotta let people do their thing.
Yeah, it's also nice to not be burdened by expectations if you're a different studio, right?
Yeah.
And you're not the originator of whatever the thing is that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who their immediate reaction to something being remade or redone or modified in any way is negative, right? And I understand where that comes from. But, like, you gotta let people succeed when they do succeed.
That also ties into I guess we could segue. I did want to talk about the Horizon Zero Dawn remake.
Yeah, super,
almost like a PSA, not so much a discussion. That makes sense if they are doing this purported TV show as well, from a business point, right? It's like you've watched the show, now play the game. But if you've played it, like you've never seen it, and if you haven't played it, well, you know, it looks just as good as any other current PS5 release. So it's like a brand new game, right? From a business perspective, selling the same thing again in that scenario where you have other pieces of that property coming out at the same time, and you want to work off of that hype, and you want to build off of that hype. That makes sense. I don't like it. I don't have to like it, right? That being said, the specificities of what they're doing are important. And again, it's still in the rumor mill. It's still a rumor. But if it does come out and they say that they're working on it, they really, really need to show that what they're working on is substantial. The Last of Us Part 1, a lot of people didn't like the price. But I think everyone agreed that the game was substantially better looking than the original. Same for this Dead Space remake. If the Horizon Zero Dawn remake or remaster, whatever it is, if it is like that and is appropriately priced, or hell, even free, then it's a non-issue. But I think the whole reason why we were talking about this before we started recording is I worry that it might be an issue because of what Sony has done and other publishers have done previously.
Relatively recent game, so that kind of is usually a red flag to me.
Yeah, it came out 2017. It's like dude, it got a PS5 patch as well. It's not like the last SKU was 2017. The most recent SKU for Horizon Zero Dawn was like 2020 or 2021.
2020, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look on Steam, I think the most recent thing is 2020.
So that's that. Yeah. And another what you said before, where it's you got to let people do their thing, Dev. I thought that'd be a good segue into just kind of a regular update on what we're all working on.
Absolutely.
We're all doing our own thing. But recently I've been getting back into music, and we were talking about this again before we hit record, and Chim, before you joined. I've just been going back into old projects. Some of them for the game, some of them for previous projects, and some of them are just not for games at all, just other stuff. And what's that saying? Like you can't see the forest when you're in between the trees or whatever. You can't see change when you're in the thick of it. I think I'm able to trace my process a little clearer than I used to be. Like I can see where I've gotten better. But let me take 3 steps back real quick. If it isn't apparent, I've been going a little neurotic recently over like trying to fix some of my older mixes.
Yeah, I get that impression.
If it sounds like I'm out of it, it's probably why. I've been cooped up inside just working on mixes that I swear to God I will never touch this piece of shit ever again. And there's so many aspects of those mixes, and you know, for any creative thing, like, you know, a draft of something, whatever it is that you're making, where it's like, you know, I hate this, but it's good that I hate it because it shows that I've changed. And it's my own damn fault for going back into the original session file for this kind of shitty song that I did 3 years ago and forcing myself to try to brush it up. Like, I don't have to do that. And I'm in a position now where it's easier to make new stuff. And in terms of the video game, I'm excited because I have this piece that I'm working on for a level in Lentinula. And I'm excited to work on it because it's honestly, for one reason only, it's not one of those 5 songs that I'm working on right now that are from like 3 years ago. It is a fresh new thing where I don't have to, I likened it to having to work through spaghetti code as a coder. There's no spaghetti code to work through because I know how to code this time. Like there's no spaghetti mix to remix because I'm not a master, but I'm much better at mixing than I was before.
Yeah, starting a finite project where it's like, you know what you're going for, you know how to do it, you know that you can do it in a way that will work better than, you know, some random shit that you're trying to deal with that was not done properly in the first place. It's so much, I feel like it's a totally different experience because, like, you just do it instead of having to wade through other stuff. And that's not even to say that in some cases, like, I know people who, I know a guy whose job is, he works for a company that has a website, and he does most of their web maintenance. And it's an old code base. It's just terrible. The people before him had no idea what they were doing. And most of what he's done in his job has basically just been, you know, taking stuff that other people did wrong, deleting it, and doing it right. Because he basically has extra time on the job to do that. And that part can be satisfying, but the part where you have to work directly with the old code, the part where you don't have the hours to completely rewrite the whole thing, that can be miserable.
Yeah, I guess the point and to that credit, it seems like that person found enjoyment in, like, you know, you do it because you're good. Ideally, you do it because you're good at it, and also because you like it.
Yeah, but there's a difference between working with the shit, the stuff that's done wrong, and that it's painful to try and figure out exactly what's going on, and wiping it and redoing it.
That's what. Yeah. Shit. Like ideally, you enjoy doing what you're doing. So because realistically, there are going to be situations where you can't wipe it and you have to untangle the spaghetti.
Exactly. Sometimes you have to, and that part, that's the unfun part.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I bring up the point for twofold. One, I just want to give an update on the game. I haven't touched the movement code in a bit. I'm getting back to it because I'm working on the music. And in regards to the music, I feel like I've been really over analytical, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with runoff from school. I'm a very analytical. I'm a very analytical writer, not composer, writer. So when it came to like all my schoolwork, I got really deep in the weeds for all the wrong reasons because I wanted to be as thorough as possible for something that was ultimately an undergraduate paper that is required to fulfill a degree thing and not because it was actually getting sent to like a committee somewhere.
But you treated it like it was being sent to a committee, didn't you?
I don't know, I made the mistake of thinking that if I was a professional in every single aspect of my academic career, then that would translate into me becoming a professional. But what it did is it just made me really like hopped up on perfectionism. And that translated into that translated into my, I mean, honestly, not my composing so much, but my producing. Like, you know, when I track down the instruments and whatever, and I sit down and I try to mix it, just really overthought a lot of it. Matter of fact, the intro to this episode, this podcast, is an example of that. I tried remixing it earlier this year, like in February. For every single one of these episodes, we have been using a mix of the theme song for this podcast that I made way back in February. And I think I'm not at risk of sounding like a perfectionist again. It's not great. I know it could be better. I'm working on it again. But I'm able to actually sit down and just think about it without overthinking. I just sit down. Now I sit down and I go, what do I want the song to feel like? Instead of, there's a bit too much low end around like 200 hertz. I gotta, whatever.
Yeah, there's two kinds of perfectionism. One's good and one's bad. The bad kind is when you get bogged down in every little detail and nothing is quite right and you nothing makes you happy because you're expecting something to be something that it's just not going to be, or because tiny details on their own may not be quite what you think they're going to be. But it's okay to want to strive to make something as good as possible. The good kind is more like being able to recognize what could be better about stuff always, and always seeking to kind of like do the best that you can possibly do in a more broad sense. The narrow perfectionism is like super bad for your productivity, but it's not a bad thing to want to always improve.
It's cyclical. That's the problem. The biggest problem with like getting into the weeds is that it's a necessary process if you're trying to get beyond hobbying making, and if you just want to take a step up above what you're usually doing, so you finally get around to doing it, and then you realize, months or maybe years pass by and you're still kind of doing the same thing because you've built this routine where it's like cyclical in nature. Like I mentioned before, you're making the same things because you've gotten comfy doing the same things, or it's because you feel that like you're more interested in the process than actually getting to an end result. Whereas, there is an opposite to it, which isn't terrible. It's like you're entirely interested in the end result, that you don't much care for the process. But either way, nothing gets done in those instances. My solution lately has been like it's very different from Joel's situation of like it's a little bogging down. That's where it's similar, but for me it's like I know I want to do the things that I'm doing. Like just today I got my mocap suit back, and because that was broken for a minute, and I think I mentioned that in the last episode, and I got everything to work again, tested a few things out, and I was like, fuck it. If I'm wearing it and it's working, I did about like 2 to 3 hours of recording motion capture that I'm down to just 2 more scenes in my Catherine video. And that doesn't include like, redoing some. I'm sure I'm going to have some issues along the way. And I have some background stuff I haven't done yet, tertiary details. I was talking to Jules about it before. But like, I'm not interested in like I feel like it sounds like weird that I can't phrase it in a good way, but here's what I'll say. I think there is a time and place for everything. There is a time to, like, based on how your day went, like if you aren't a full-time artist, or if you're like in school or something like I am, then you know what days are good. Like my girlfriend calls them good bones days, or bad bones days. Like you have a healthy bones day. And I have very unhealthy bones days because I feel too tired to like do anything like a dumbass. So I do like the grunt work, usually the grunt work.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
bogs you down if you're not working on the bigger picture stuff. So lately, you make those adjustments. There's a time and place for everything. And
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable skill.
Yeah, if you're doing more things than just the one thing that you're doing, like if you have a project, this is to the viewer. If you have a project, that means that you're, the roles that you're encompassing, you have to make time for every single one of them, unless you want your project done. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. I guess, when you think about it, right, like in that whole process of as you're trying to get better at stuff and, try and become more of a professional, right? Yeah, you do need to spend time in the weeds, but you have to like kind of, I guess, accept where you are and learn. And the thing, it's not about being okay with not doing things as well as you want to. It's about continuing to try different things instead of just spending all of your time on one thing, because you know that after you've done it 50 times, you're going to look back on that one and realize if I'd sat there for 100 hours and wasted all my time on that one thing, I wouldn't have got where I am now.
Nope. Sometimes you have to put aside these projects that you already picked up and put down for a year or two, and then just be willing to like set that aside so that you can do other things. And even if you're not gonna, like, even if those things are bigger things or they're smaller projects, as long as you can set aside that time and be like, okay, maybe I will come back to it, maybe I won't, but in my case, it's, I came back to my projects.
And if it's something you're really committed to, like something you really care about, and you're not there, like you can't do it the way you want to do it, like feel free to work at it, but you can always come back to things later. Like if it is something that's important to you, you will come back.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's art in general for me on my end. It's like no matter how much you want to put it away, even if you don't want it or do want it, you put it away. If you're naturally inclined to keep coming back to it, then you're going to keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
You can't will it. It just happens.
Not to get like too, I don't know, cynical about creating. I don't know. Like and I appreciate both of your perspectives on it, because I frankly don't really have any perspective, and I feel like I'm not speaking about others, just myself. I feel the need to like get advice from other people on this sort of thing. I not this is gonna be the Jules episode. Jesus Christ. So historically, I've had a really, really shitty work ethic. I think what is the term? I'm pretty sure. I guarantee you all, everyone on this podcast, including Soy Boy and Rojo, had this as well. Like in elementary and middle school, there was like the gifted kid class.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I something tells me that all of us have encountered that at some point. And what that does is, was it GG Gamer Doctor? I forget his name, but he's the
healthygamer.gg.
That's the guy. He had his live stream and all that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're treated a certain way that permits you to not have to work as hard, because you're not being pushed in a way that is beneficial to you and your future. And I had that all the way through college, which I think is not, I promise you, it is not a humble brag. What I'm saying is that I got by on bare minimum effort, and I was able to ride that all the way through college. And because of that, I never developed healthy work ethic.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I am
Even though
exactly the
yeah,
same.
I had the feeling that we're all friends, so there has to be a reason, right? And even though I had like jobs, and they were never full. The closest thing I had to a full-time job was my last semester of school where I interned at an animation firm. But because the work that comes with that is so incredibly diverse and sudden and constantly shifting, it didn't feel like a 9 to 5. It felt fun and exciting. And those kinds of jobs are out there. I can apply to it again.
Oh
But,
yeah. Oh yeah.
In terms of my own work, applying work ethic, which I never had to begin with, to something that is driven entirely insularly by myself is something new that I can admit that I have never done before. even though I just finished college. It's just, I don't know. It's weird. And then, not that there's a right way to live your life, but for what I do and what I want to do, it just seems strange that that's something I'm working on right now. But I appreciate the way you guys posture it. I think
part of it is you gotta like find out for yourself like what works for you and what doesn't. And it may sort of, I don't know, take a long time. For me, like, I mean, I have a really hard time doing stuff unless I have some kind of like external pressure. So like,
yeah,
I actually feel like jobs usually are easier for me to deal with than like classwork has ever been, because classwork, it's like, sure, you go to class. Yeah, that's the external part. But then you got to do your homework, and they don't tell you when to do that or how much time to put into it. So that was always the hard part for me.
I'm with you on that. That was the hard part for me as well.
I wanted to say this, Jules, and I promise you I won't make a habit of doing this, like bringing outside stuff into the podcast, but it isn't, literally it is this topic. I've said this many times before when I talked about my burnout. You talked about like not being burned out per se, because there's never a point in time where you feel like I'm going to put this aside.
I'm not super quick. I'm not burnt out. It's just a weird feeling. But
I know. That's what I'm saying. This isn't the exact same discussion. This is not even the exact same thing, but I'm just saying, like, when we talked about that was because like we both had feelings of like burning out, but for us it was completely, like, for me it was completely different in relation to like how you perceive it and how you, like, for me, I will just put something away, not indefinitely, but I will definitely put it away, and I won't be an artist for like half a year. Like, that's happened to me.
You guys sure you don't have? You guys sure you both don't have ADHD?
I'm almost entirely certain that I do have it.
I was tested when I was about 13 years old by a professional. I went for like 2 weeks, and they said I don't have it. I just have different like learning, specifically reading like problems.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like
when I
dyslexia?
retain information. No, not dyslexia. I don't actually have a problem with that. It's completely irrelevant. But like when I read things, I have to like pace. I can't read anything out loud, and that's weird. And I've been fighting against that because it is
audiobooks.
I do that for school.
Awesome.
I pace around for like. It's very hot down here in the South, and so I go out really early to listen to my textbooks because there's so many fucking books I have to read. And but for personal stuff, I don't know why, for personal like fun reading, I just get the physical books and I just pace around while I read it and bump into walls.
Hey, if that works for you, hell yeah.
But what I wanted to say is this: regardless of if it's like burnout or it's a completely different feeling, it's just a completely new feeling, I still will always say this, and it's something you just mentioned before we even got into this, was like, from the outside perspective, will always give you something different than being in the weeds of it. It's the same thing right now. I say, like, if you, and only you know this, it's always like that, with artists, like, only you know if you need to give yourself time to like taking a break is one thing, but the way I would view it is like, hey, if you've been doing this for several years, and you kind of keep coming back to it, and it's like never finishing in a way. Like maybe the best thing to do is just to like, instead of viewing it as a break, give it time to like give it a painterly observation. You know, when painters, they paint their oil, like oil painters or just any painters in general, they do a landscape, they're looking at their canvas, what's in front of them. If they're stuck in the details, then they're only getting 1% of the canvas done. If they're doing it from super far away and they walk back, they look at what they're looking at, they walk forward. All these different observations gives you different cues, different spaces, I guess, to make your work. And that's all I wanted to say, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the change in perspective is something I'm again, just I can only speak for myself
I
right
think
now.
I think this has been a great
lacking.
group therapy session.
Thanks,
Hey,
man.
you know what? Freaking Candid podcast, and most candid episode we've ever had. It's like a time machine, a time capsule, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Mhm.
I'd like to be able to. I'd like to be able to look back at this and be like, oh, what a loser. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I can't wait to look back on this episode and be like, oh man, these companies, they did not do good things.
Yeah,
It
EA,
just,
they ended up creating Mecha Hitler.
and I bought it.
They literally brought about the Third World War, and I bought it.
Something
This
about
episode
Hitler,
will
but
not
like
age
Mecha
well.
Hitler is really funny.
That's what the people at id thought when they made
Yeah.
Wolfenstein.
Since you used the word time capsule, I just wanted to. I'm not gonna add on to it. To literally groups therapy session. Nice call. But like for me and create like, you know, I don't think that like deving will always just be like what you're doing at that time, or like what checklist you're finishing up. If you're deving for a short film or for a game or for anything, then there's lots of things that kind of happen, because if you're not a full-time artist, I'm not a full-time artist, barely part-time, and like you have all these other responsibilities and life just gets in the way, then that kind of stuff plays into what a dev update would be, in my opinion. Like for me, where I'm at literally today, 10/14/2022, I have a Spider-Man problem. I have a spider problem. It's really bad. It's an infestation. Like by day, I mentioned this before, like it's all college. It's nothing but college. And then I make time at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day for art and stuff. But, you know, like if one thing overlaps the other, if it's like art over college, then obviously the end result of that would be bad grades, or, you know, not getting the most out of the money I'm paying for my college. But the other end of that is like, if it's all college, which it has been this whole semester, is the end result of that is like no art, then it's bad times. Yeah. That's all it is for me.
Solid.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's all I got.
No, I think this is really valid, and I was gonna say something snarky like, "Well, I don't want to leave it on a downer note," but the reality of the situation is exactly what you just said. I mean, the dev update doesn't have to be explicitly game stuff. It can just be the stuff surrounding us, the people who are trying to make this game.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think that's fair. I mean, when Hello Games flooded, the people who made No Man's Sky, you better believe the dev update they posted was about their studio flooding, right?
Of course.
They
Absolutely.
didn't just do no update.
Yeah.
So
for me, it's just
Yeah.
in bursts. That's all it is. Like it isn't a downer update. Like I literally will say this as a positive note. It is, for me, art is just in bursts. And it's better than kind of the alternative, what I got used to, my cyclical nature of how I create projects, which is like, you know, I make something, there's a lot of momentum in the beginning, and then, you know, it's that classic writer's block where you're staring at a blank piece of paper and you're doing this for months, you know? So it's not like what is that conducive to? Nothing. But for me now, it's like, you know, it's a little frustrating, not gonna lie. It's very frustrating only being able to do things in bursts, but at the same time, things are getting done. I only have 2 more scenes and some edits to do, and who knows what happens when this video comes out. Maybe nothing happens, and that's still fine. I have more things I'd like to do. But if something happens, that's fucking crazy. Because then there's people listening, more and more people listening to this podcast. By the way, hi to everybody listening right now. I know it's
oh yeah, that's right. We got real people, and they might, retroactively go back and watch your stuff, even if it doesn't hit right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
I think that's that's a measured response to creating what you just said. I'm glad that you said it that way, because it's perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's a perspective. It's your perspective.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear it.
It's a different way to live, and it's a different, I've said this time and time again since like we've been making stuff together, which is like all a 12th grade, like fucking 2017.
Been a while.
Yeah. But like we're in different mediums, but that doesn't make us like different artists. Like art is art no matter what, and everybody kind of goes through the motions. And if it's just good to check in. It's good to like see what's going on if you're creating and shit, because like it's important to have a good time while you're doing it. That's what I'm saying.
Hey, that's fair. We should send this episode to what's his name? GG Healthy Gamer.
Oh, my therapist.
Yeah, send it to your personal therapist, healthygamer.gg.
Yeah. All right.
Well, I think we got to wrap, but
end on a somber
audience. Yeah, you know what? Maybe this
art.
episode, but the next episode will come out with the party favors and the horns and the fanfare.
God, yes.
And then I'll have to edit it all because it's going to clip.
Oh,
Ladies
you bet.
and gentlemen, and that one person who commented on the previous episode, thank you for even existing, by the way.
Thank you.
Thanks again for attending. I can't believe this is a podcast. I can't believe that we just had a therapy session, but that's what we did. And that's what we do around here. No, we don't. Don't quote me on that.
Crying in the club with the homies.
Yeah,
I am not your lawyer. This is not legal advice.
Yeah, I'm not your therapist. This is not life advice. I'd like to do. I think this is going to work out this way. About 2 weeks.
An episode.
No, 2 weeks from now, we'll be able to sneak in a little spooky episode. So let's try to make that happen. All right. Yes.
Maybe.
Maybe. If not, you can just play Overwatch 2 and let me know how that tastes in your mouth.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it'll taste great.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.